This is Alexis Newman from Harbison Walker International, and I'm a member of AIST. I'm here at AIS Tech in Pittsburgh on May 18th with Ruth Engel of Refractory Consulting Services. This recording is part of AIME's Oral History Capture Program. So let's start at the beginning. Tell me about where you grew up.
Well, I grew up in Santiago, Chile, and went through most of my high school there. And in 1970, I came to the U.S. as an exchange student first, went back to Chile. It was only a 6-month program, which was on purpose, so I would not lose my year, so I could graduate with my class. And I went back, and a few months later, actually 3 months later, Allende was elected, and at the night of his election, we decided that actually my whole family left. I came to the States, they went to other places, and one of the reasons was that one of his platform statements were that he was not going to allow any more brain drain, that if you got a university degree, you were not going to have a passport to leave. And none of us really neither myself nor my friends wanted to find out if it was going to be true or not. Because if you wait long enough to find out if it is true, usually it's too late. So most of us just packed up and left. Different countries, different places, and different times, but we left. Our parents or the rest of the family followed, or we all left together, depending on the situation. I came back to the United States at that time. That was an adventure to get a visa to get back into the country. But it was finished up high school, went to university, and I've been here ever since.
Okay, so you mentioned your visa. What steps did you have to go through to get into the States?
When I went into the embassy, because I was in Santiago, so we had the embassy, not the consulate. I went in for it, and I was denied my visa, and I had to ask for the tourist visa. I couldn't get a student visa because the paperwork would have taken too long. And they denied it. So, and you sit around and wait for they call you. And so I asked, why was I denied? And they had the vice consul actually came down and talked to me, and he told me that point blank that they didn't want people like me because I was going to change my visa to not to a student. I mean, he said, you're going to stay around. You're not going to be just a tourist. Your plan is to stay. That was true. I mean, I'm not going to say that was not true. I mean, I already knew that I was going to go back to high school, finish up, and try to go to university. I mean, I had to be accepted. And but I argued with him about it. I mean, for several hours, really. We were standing off to the side and arguing back and forth in English. And finally, I got the feeling just to get rid of me. He stamped my passport and said, here you go. And that's how I was able to come back to the States.
That's fascinating. So once you got back to the States, what school did you attend?
Well, I went to East Grand Rapids High School. And if you're wondering, President Ford went to East Grand Rapids High School. I was there, and so from there I went to University of Michigan. Mm-hmm. I mean, I was already in Michigan. I only applied to one university. My SATs were pretty bad, but I went in as a foreigner, so it was not quite as stringent as for the people who lived in Michigan itself. Also, my transcripts and my grade point from Chile was very good, and in the U.S. it was pretty good too, but not nearly as good as from Chile. There were languages. The other problem was that coming from one school system to another school system, I had big holes. The Chilean school system, and my year was the last of that type of school system, had been organized by German immigrants. It went from a German organized school system and design to a US-style school system, and it was many years ago, so they may have changed it again. I do not know. In any case, when I went through school, the whole country learned the same materials. Well, it was a minimum for each grade. In other words, when I was in 7th grade, I learned the same thing in my school as everybody else in the 7th grade in the country, not just the frontier. So not just Santiago, but the whole country. So that meant there was really a pretty uniform minimum knowledge. As I say, it was the minimum you could always add to it in different schools. There was a certain, there was no, well, girls don't do science or boys don't do this. There was none of that because we all learned the same thing. The only difference was that girls had home ec and boys had shop. That was it. Everything else was the same. I went to school from about 1:30 in the afternoon to about 5:30 in the afternoon, 5 days a week. And when I came to the US, I was behind in certain key areas in the sense that I did not never seen things because of the different number of subjects that I had. But I did not feel like I was behind in how to study or things like that. Once you are in high school, I was supposed to be in the morning, being, let's say, 7 to 12. And in the afternoon would have been the elementary school in the same building. But we had a big earthquake, and my school was unsafe to use. We could not go there. So we were out for a while, and then we went in the afternoon. We went in the afternoon to a boys' school. Oh, I should have said, it is either a boys' school or a girls' school. I went to what is called, in this country, it would be a public school. We would use the term government school, but that was the minority. But nevertheless, it was gender segregated. And so the Minister of Education or whoever, I don't know, made arrangements for us to go use the building of a boys' school. But they went in the morning then, and we went in the afternoon. You had your teachers come into the classroom, teach, and leave. But because you had all these different subjects, you didn't go in depth into any of them. I come to the United States, and let's say in math, I had big holes. I didn't have any trigonometry when I got here. My classmate had seen it at least twice already, and things like that. So it was catch-up time in many areas, because it was going in much more in depth in any of the classes here than what I had dealt with before. So I had to try to catch up. In some areas I did, some areas I didn't. I'm not going to say that I always did it all. So that's another reason why my SATs were not very good.
But wow, you only applied to one school. I think I applied to at least 6 or 8 when I was...
It never even crossed my mind to apply to more than one. I mean, University of Michigan is known worldwide. I had heard about it in Chile. I mean, it had a reputation everywhere. And so it just never even crossed my mind. I had filled out all the paperwork for taking exams and applying for a university system in Chile. Now, again, it's very different. What you do there is you take exams countrywide. They're given in one day for the whole country. At the end of the school year, you have math and Spanish, obviously, and then some subject matters. And I don't even remember anymore exactly. If you have 3 or 4 things that you want to study that you write down the acceptable universities. You have a choice, let's say, of 3. And then they have weeks or months later, they publish the list of informing you if you are going and where you're going and what you're studying. and they're published in the newspaper with your name and what you will study and where you're going.
Oh, so everybody knows exactly what you're going to do.
The whole country knows. I mean, because as I say, the exams are given countrywide, and the lists are published, of course, countrywide. So yes, everybody knows. So, I mean, the idea of several universities just wasn't really even in my thought process.
Okay. So what did you pursue when you were at Michigan?
Well, I started out thinking that I would study physics, because that's what I was going to study. That was one of my choices in Chile. I mean, in Chile, my choices were chem-ed, physics, and I don't remember what the third one was that I had put down. So when I applied to University of Michigan, you know, you have to write down what you want to do, and I wrote down physics. I would have made a lousy physicist. I would have been better. Chem-ed would have been better. Just my looking in hindsight. I have always been interested in geology. In Chile, I would not have been able to study it. I mean, I couldn't have gotten a degree in it. I could have studied it. And the reason I couldn't have gotten my degree in it is because you have to do like an internship over the summers that won't have taken me out into the petroleum fields. Petroleum fields had nothing for women. I couldn't have done it. I couldn't have done my internships. Therefore, I couldn't have gotten my degree. I could have studied in geology. So that one was out. A couple other things that I looked into were out because I would never have been able to be employed as a woman. And so, you know, again, it didn't cross my mind. At the University of Michigan, second semester, I took a course called Gem and Gem Materials, which is in the geology department, but it's for anybody. It's not a course that you take if you're going to major in it. And after that, it suddenly dawned on me that I could actually study geology. I mean, I could go into it. So that's what I did. I mean, I took sequence courses backwards. I mean, which makes it difficult and quite challenging when you take second semester first and then the first semester of a sequence, but that's what it was. I did it in 3 years, so I was not going to mess around. It was a matter of economics. I had enough credits from high school with AP. I went a semester to a junior college too, because I was done really in the high school. So, and again, State of Michigan, thank you for saying you have to go 2 consecutive semesters. Now, it doesn't say that you start in the winter and then you do your spring semester. Yeah. You do it backwards, but that's how I did. It was consecutive. I fulfilled the requirement.
So did you start in the spring or did you start in the fall?
I came in January the first time as an exchange student. And so I started then and went back to Chile in July, was back in the States by the end of September, and I did September to December, so I did 2 consecutive semesters in high school, fulfilled my requirement, and I got my high school degree. So, yeah, I mean, that's what I say. I mean, you do what you have to do. Oh, and then I had to take U.S. history. I had to finish up for University of Michigan requirement. U.S. history and government. Those were the 2. I took those 2 in the high school. Afterwards, I mean, just to fulfill all requirements.
So did you have any professors in college or any other students that were mentors to you?
I would say at the university, they were not exactly mentors, but professors. You ended up, if you went into it, you were a colleague. You were not just a student studying geology. They knew you were going to be a colleague, and they treated you like a colleague, and they looked out for you like that. It was a very different relationship than having a professor come in and give you a lecture, whatever. I mean, we would go to their houses, we knew their families. I mean, if there was an issue with some student, they would go on another student and say, hey, go and make sure that this person is doing okay, keep an eye on them, they're having difficulties, whatever. So that's why I say it was very much like that, at least at that time. I mean, no idea how it is now. I haven't been back for a long time.
So it was like a community.
Yeah, it was like, as I say, we all looked out for each other, and that's why I say we were not a student that was there. Once you went into the system as going into geology as a, getting your bachelor's in that or advanced degree, you were part of, of the system. You were a colleague. You were not considered. I mean, yeah, they had to teach you, and you didn't know as much, and they had to write recommendations, all of those good things. But still, it was not like you were just another student coming through.
Okay.
So I mean, yes, I had a problem with one of my professors. So I went to my advisor, and my advisor said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. Come back tomorrow to find out what the result is, type of a deal. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so after your undergrad, you went into grad school. What influenced your decision to go to grad school?
Well, after my undergrad, I was going to take a break. Mm-hmm. My husband, I was married at that time. My husband was going for his PhD, and I was working, and I was getting very bored because being in a student environment, but not being a student, working really, the challenge isn't there. I mean, and I was working in the geology department doing some data gathering and things like that. I also was working as a surveyor, so I was getting bored. So I put in my application for grad school. Started in January, which is not a good way of starting grad school, but that's when I did. And went to grad school. I was a lot happier having that challenge than being bored.
So you just enjoyed taking the hard way with school starting in January and fulfilling your credits?
That's how it worked out. I mean, I just, I was not going to wait, the winter semester, then the summer through, and to go with the general course. I mean, I already knew a lot of the things. I already had taken a lot of the courses. Actually, going to the same university in the same department again gave me a different problem, and that is, what courses do I take that I haven't taken already that I want to take? I mean, there were courses in other areas within geology that I was not interested at all, like the fossils, paleontology, things like that. No, I was not interested. So I had to find things that I was semi-interested in, if nothing else, to fulfill my requirements. So that's, again, no, I never went the easy way.
So did you prefer grad school or undergrad, looking back?
Actually, it didn't make much of a difference because we were the same people, the same professors, the same TAs, so, it just a little bit more age for all of us. But we just went through it and went about the biggest thing was that I did not have to take field camp again because I already had done that as an undergraduate. Most people, when they go into geology, either as an undergrad or if you didn't do it then, grad student, you do field camp, which gives you a lot of credit hours, but it also takes up a whole summer.
So is there a lot of travel with field camp, or?
Well, actually, University of Michigan owns property in Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and they have a big camp there, which used to be an old, I think it's Army or Scout camp. When I went there, the cabins were arranged in a right angle, and as a good old type of fashion camp, the facilities for women, let's say, were rather limited, and that's being an understatement. That's giving them more credit than they had. We had a hot water heater, which was good for about 2 people. If you wanted to take a shower after that, you went to cold water because you went through all the hot water. There were a few toilets And that was it. While on the other hand, the men's side had a whole shower house, a whole bathroom. And at that time already, there was an undergraduate course, a 100 level course, besides the 400 level, which was for people in geology. There was an even split between the number of males and females at the camp itself. So the facilities for women were woefully not appropriate, and they were just didn't really keep track what time I know that they have changed, and they have added since, because I get a newsletter from the department. I talk, some of my friends stayed in geology, so they are more active at the university level to see what things are going on. But that year, really, that was between the undergraduate course and the course for the people within geology, was really an even split. I think there was one person more on one side than the other, but I mean, you couldn't have it more even than that. And so it became, I mean, they already knew, but it became very obvious that it had to be addressed.
Okay, so after college, what was your first position?
Well, I had to cool my heels for a while, because I was done again before my husband was. And so I was, actually, I ended up doing, working with university professors, or anybody who was giving presentations at big conferences. I would work with them on how to design their slides, and would do illustrations for them at that time. And which was interesting, because I often had arguments. I would say, you can only have 2 ideas on a slide, which is still the case with PowerPoint. And they wanted to put all the data on a slide. I'm saying, right, nobody can read it, and it's just not a good idea. So we would go back and forth, and I would work through that. Through them, I took some other courses. I had a job offer from analyzing Landsat, which is one of the satellites, geology data and other things. But I couldn't take that position because it required clearance, security clearance. And as a foreigner, I couldn't get security clearance because, you know, those Landsat satellites were put up for the military, not really for geology or agronomy or anything else. So that's why I would have needed a security clearance, and I just couldn't get it. I was, as I say, I was on a student visa at that point. And I had applied for the green card, which, by the way, at that time was blue, not green. That was the first thing I said when they handed it to me. This is not green.
Your green card was blue?
Yeah, at that time, it was like an 8x11 piece of paper with my picture on it. The background was totally blue. So yeah, my first words were, this is not green. Why do they call it a green card?
Did they say why
No,
it was blue?
The gentleman at it was at customs coming through. The system is you have to go outside the country, or at least at that time it was, you have to be outside the country, you have to come in. And they will, at least I had a sealed envelope from, went through the paperwork at the consulate in Toronto. I was living in Michigan, so Toronto was very convenient to go. It was also one of the busiest consulates, which I did not realize. So it took over 2 years for me to get my green card. And just the paperwork and the waiting and things like that. So we came through Detroit. I gave the customs official a sealed envelope. He opened it up, signed it, and handed it to me for me to sign. And that was my green card. And as I say, it was just a piece of paper, really. And at the bottom it says, do not duplicate. Of course, we all duplicate, because if something happens to that place, you need to be able to have all the documentation, the number, and where it came, and when you got it, and all these other things. So what's the most efficient way of tracking that? Is you make a picture, you make a copy of it. So yeah, but we couldn't admit to it. I mean, and of having done that, it would, there was in big red letters at the bottom, do not duplicate and whatever the penalty.
So you
would have
just
been.
nod and go, yeah, I'm not gonna duplicate this at all.
Exactly. Not only that, but nobody admitted, but we all knew. I mean, everybody had to do it because you needed to keep track of it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, and after that, as I say, I worked as a surveyor at some point, and then we moved down to Ohio. My husband got a job at Miami of Ohio, and I knew that I could get a position in that area, not in geology, I already knew that, but that would be material sciences, which we were working very close with engineering school, metallurgy, material sciences. Well, at that time, their building was a few yards from ours, and they would come to the geology department to take classes, and we would take classes and use their equipment. So it was always a back and forth. I never considered it to be a very solid boundary between the two departments. Yes, they did certain things that we did not do and the other way around, but there was lots of cooperation between the two departments. And came down, as I say, to Southern Ohio, and applied to many different areas like GE Aviation, which is close by Evendale. They were interested, but the ones that really were interested was a place called, it was a Monsanto Laboratories, which was, again, a U.S. Defense, under the U.S. Defense Department. So they couldn't even interview me in person. They had to interview me over the phone. Now, you have to understand this. Remember, this is in 1978. So doing an interview over the phone was definitely, a highly unusual thing. But because I couldn't get security clearance, I couldn't even set foot on that facility for them to talk to me directly.
So they interviewed you over the phone? They didn't
even though they couldn't hire me because I couldn't get the security clearance, they were really wanted to hire me. They went and looked at all possible ways of going around that issue. Yes.
So how did that conversation go? Just, hey, we're really interested in you, but
well, we're really interested in you. We need a crystallographer. We need to do X-ray diffraction analysis, this and that. I mean, they also told me some of the things they do. I mean, we all knew that they were doing a lot in the radioactive areas, research, things like that. There was one of the Superfund sites now, because they moved the laboratory. They closed the one in Miamisburg in Ohio and moved it somewhere else. But, so, I mean, some things were known, let's say, of what they were working on. And he said, we will look if we can find, we were really interested, we'll see if we can figure out a way to get around the security clearance issue that you're having. So that's how the conversation went. And I mean, I sent an application to ARMCO at that time. I mean, again, it's pre-computer, so you don't really know if they have an opening. So you just sent resumes out to different companies at that point. And ARMCO called me back. So we set up interviews. Actually, I was interviewed twice because the first time not everybody was in town. So they asked me for the second time round on it in their research department. And I started working for them. My start date was 1/1/79. Yeah, it's a holiday, but it was still 1/1. And actually, I was working at that time in welding products, development of welding products. ARMCO at that time, which became AK Steel and is Cliffs today, was the sole representative for Lincoln Electric, a huge welding company out of Cleveland. I mean, pretty much all big welding things worldwide, not US representative, but outside the US, they were the representatives for Lincoln Electric. So that was the reason of why we were working on that. The other thing was that ARMCO had built a welding product plant in Brazil. And so for support of that, we needed to understand and know what's going on. So there were two of us working on welding products within the refractory group, At that time, it was called Refractories and Graphite. And research, there was a welding group at the ARMCO Research Center. They would do the testing of the material. But the welding product itself is a bauxite base, has bauxite, has some alloys, ferroalloys in there, and some fluorine and things like that. So really, if you're thinking back about it now, it's a slag. Really. So, yeah, it makes sense. We were working with slags, but we had it, not the welding product, not the welding group, which worked about in parameters, how you best weld, how you have to prepare the surfaces, what are the electrical issues that you can run into when welding, things like that. I mean, they did not have that, and we did not have that expertise either. So that's why we worked together. But so that program was going on for until end of '81. And because it was a very basic research, when we were running what is called full factorial experiments, which means all the different things that variables we looked into. Why that we would run, if you take it out, what is the effect of it, things like that. So we looked at it, and it comes in batches. We design the experiments, we make the product. While we're making that product, really, there was no analysis for either my coworker or myself to do necessarily. So I started asking to go out into the Middletown Works. If anybody was going to Middletown Works, I would say, can I come along? I mean, sometimes I could, sometimes I couldn't, which meant that I had to have safety clothes to go out to the mill, which was another challenge because I'm a small person, and most safety clothing at that time was men's extra large, which was rather big on me. Actually, it made me unsafe, not safe to have that because it was way too big. And the biggest thing that I was very lucky that my feet are the size they are. I know it sounds kind of odd, but I was able to wear the smallest men's metatarsal size that they make, which allowed me to go into the mill. Because if I would have had a smaller foot, I would not have been able to buy metatarsal shoes, which meant that I couldn't have gone out into the mill. I mean, that's it. I mean, it was as simple as that. My hard hat was always too big for me, again, because at that time it was all for men, and I put it on the smallest setting, but it still was still too big for me.
So what did you do for FR clothes? I mean, I know there's more options for women now for safety gear, but still not a wide range of what's available.
We didn't really wear much, okay? First of all, I was on the finishing side of things, so I didn't need silvers. I did eventually get silvers when I moved into there, but those were special ordered. They had to make them for me. And the first, my first full silvers code, they messed up and they made it too long for me and too narrow, so I could not put it on even though it's special order, yes. So, and I had been waiting and waiting and waiting. I worked several months and I couldn't go out into the mill. I couldn't go certain areas and do work because I didn't have full silvers. So I ended up having to, so then when they finally got in and I discovered that it was improperly sized, I mean, I was extremely upset, and they heard very clearly how upset I was with it, and they got me one in a couple of weeks, which was properly sized. So yeah, but getting full silvers was quite a challenge.
It sounds like it definitely was a challenge.
Yeah. And at that time, we wore jeans into the mill. Okay. Later on, we were in greens, but the pants we could pretty much get in any size or adjust, shorten or them. I mean, you can't make them longer, and the jacket, who cares? Because you're sometimes wearing very little clothes when it isn't summertime, and they also need to fit over 5 layers of clothing for the wintertime. So you need a lot of flexibility for that.
When you started out at ARMCO, you were one of 2 professional women, correct?
That is correct. Major integrated plant, I don't remember, 18,000 people working there. It could be totally wrong. I don't remember really. But there was, yes, the other lady was a lawyer. I don't think I ever met her. I met one of the lawyers, corporate lawyers, but I don't know if she was the one that was hired already when I was hired in, or not. But yes, and then within research, after me, there were several other women that were hired in the plant's slim pickings, and let's say that the wallpaper was an interesting wallpaper. It was usually, I don't know if people would know today, but they were usually Playboy centerfolds.
So with that, were there any challenges that you experienced?
Well, I was young. I did not know refractories that much. So going out into the mill to work with it, I usually was tagging along with somebody. I mean, I had to do a quick study on certain things. I had to learn what is a reheat furnace? What is a soaking pit? I had no idea. You need to go to soaking pits. Well, what do we do there? What is it? You know, the same with reheats and everything else, because this was just complete new vocabulary, new areas, everything for me. But I started out at the finishing end, soaking pits on down. We had soaking pits, and I was tested like most new people, especially when you're young. It doesn't matter what you are when you start out, and especially if you had as green as I was, you get tested. Some of it was, you know, what are you going to do? I mean, again, soaking pit, there was this, we were tearing it out, and there was this big ladder, and, you know, I was asked some questions, so they said, let's go down. And it's like 3 stories down to climb down on this long ladder to get to the bottom of the soaking pit. I mean, they had dug out some things, and I knew it didn't really matter what I thought about it. I knew I was going to be going down that ladder, regardless of what I thought. And off we went. And people had quite a bit of patience usually when I asked questions, as I say, probably very basic questions, because as I say, I had no idea. You know, that's when I learned that iron and steel are 2 different things. I thought that they were the same thing. Fe, what do you mean? And so, yes, but there were a couple challenges, and I would be forewarned sometimes with my boss that probably certain ideas I had or certain questions that I had, if I asked them, I was going to get challenged, and very much said that, you know, I did not know what I was talking about. And sometimes that was true, but often it was not quite as bad. And so we would discuss how to handle it and what to say before I went into the mill. And that helped really, because, as I say, I had no idea what what the equipment was. It was that I was looking at, or why. When I asked a lot of questions, sometimes in the group and sometimes in the mill. I was not afraid of them thinking that I was totally out to lunch. I did not know what I was doing, because I might as well know it up front, because otherwise it can get you into more trouble. That way they kind of weigh your suggestion. Sometimes it backfires. Sometimes you know, you can sit out and you can discuss things a lot more, because they're trying to explain to you, and you can explain your ideas, and you can come to an agreement a lot simpler than trying to convince them that you are right or that they should do something.
How do you think going out into the mill helped you with your first position?
Oh, it definitely helped me. It challenged me in many ways. I needed to explain things to others. I needed to justify everything I did. which is actually not a bad idea. I mean, it gets tiresome. I am not going to say not, but because you have to think about, why am I going to do that? You have to actually analyze your position and consider the pros and cons before you venture out, because you have to be ready for those questions. I mean, after a while, you don't get them anymore, but still, it's a good checkpoint. Is this really true? Are my assumptions correct? What are my assumptions? Because at a certain point, you make assumptions, and you may be wrong on it, or you may have forgotten or overlooked something. So having to go on step by step, or rethink or discuss it, hopefully discuss it before you go out there, not to be, is useful, because you actually have to formulate a lot of things, and you are ready for many questions, which you may or may not get, but at least you are able to explain yourself, justify your position, be ready for counterpoints. That is, sometimes you get them, sometimes you don't. So it is quite useful, and that's really how then later on, if you write something up, you need to go through those things anyway, because you have to be able to make a coherent picture of whatever it is. So it really kind of prepares you for that. And actually, I miss it some, to be challenged on my assumptions, on my conclusions, because I'm afraid sometimes that I missed something, that I just didn't take into consideration something that may be obvious to somebody else. And, it's something that you really don't want to do. I mean, there are, from safety aspect and from just product aspect, you want to be sure, need to be able to, ensure everybody's safety, and that the product that you are working on is the right product, that you didn't add anything that shouldn't have been there. I mean, if you don't make chemistry in steel, and you don't make properties, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So you really don't want to have that your name associated with a bad heat.
No, definitely not. Is there a particular challenge that you had that stands out in your mind?
Early on, there was a challenge that there were, let's say, professionally and technically, the steel industry, and I assume others too, have come a long way. I remember going into a meeting where they wanted to do what we would call now like a emissivity spray, except at that time, the technology that really did not exist yet, and the theory didn't either. And so what they were doing, they were spraying some very expensive mud on the walls of the furnace. And I knew that. And so I challenged the presenter. And what I didn't realize that by doing that, I was challenging some of the mill people. And it did not go over well, let's say. But in general, I have had many a ladle named after me, because if you run a trial in a unit, that unit gets your name while you're running the trial. So everybody knows if something goes wrong, that who to talk to. As I say, mainly ladles. I've had many ladles, as I say, with my name on it. And there was one situation where it didn't work out properly, but in general it did. And so yes, I mean, the one that I remember really is the one where they tried to insulate by putting some mud on it. And actually it worked in the sense of insulation, because it just would have closed the cracks. But it was, they were giving it attributes that it definitely did not have, to justify some of the stories they were telling about it.
Okay, so how did your geology degree help you in the refractory industry?
Oh, that's, Refractories are man-made assemblages of minerals, and in geology have naturally occurring assemblages of minerals that are modified by water, steam, temperature, pressure. Now, in general, in steelmaking, we have all of those. Well, not water, hopefully, but we have all the alterations. Not with pressure. Usually, most of our vessels are not pressurized, but it's pretty much the same thing. I mean, if you look at it in that way, you know there is no difference. You have reactions between all these different elements, and you study how they work out or why they work out and why things happen. And that, so yeah, it's. And when I started out, many of the refractory people were actually geologists by training.
Okay. So did you have any mentors in your first role?
Oh yeah, my boss was definitely make sure that I would be prepared before going out into the mill. He could, I mean, when it came to welding, he was not involved really. I mean, he was involved in the sense of allowing us to work. He provided lab, but it was really basic research. There's nothing written. Very little written on submerged arc welding fluxes, at least at that time, and there were just not much really that he could provide with it, except maybe if we ruffled some feathers to take care of those, but otherwise there was not much that he could do. Once we started with refractories and steel making, things like that, I had several people within the group that would take, not just me, but also some of the other people, younger engineers, out to the mill, introduce them, show us what was important, what was critical, how to read the data sheet, what to pay attention, what to ignore, and a lot of other things. So it wasn't a formal mentor system, but we were understudies for quite a while before we were allowed to be on our own out there. So in order to ensure that things worked smoothly, that we knew what was going on, the people in the mill knew that we knew what we were doing, and things like that. Yes.
So you were people in training before you moved on to...
Yes, but very much so.
So what other positions did you hold at ARMCO?
Well, I started out, as I say, working in welding. The titles we had were pretty much set out. Originally, it was every 5 years you got a new title type of a deal, but in practice, it wasn't quite that, rigorous changes. So then I went finishing end. I started doing some of the hot side of the steel making side, and I quickly discovered that most people within our group had a vessel or an area that they specialized in. And it seemed like nobody was doing electric furnaces or things, stainless. So I ended up working a lot in what was ARMCO Baltimore at that time. It's been shut down for years. And we had the horizontal caster that was installed when I was working there, went from stopper to slide gates in the ladles. We had AOD. I learned a lot about stainless steel making. I mean, we were standing on a shanty next to the vessel, doing calculations for additions on an adding machine. We would get the chemistry, and that's how I learned to do stainless. I mean, that was my training on how you make steel.
Mm-hmm.
So I wouldn't be able to do it today, but I was pretty good at doing it then because I was in the habit of doing it. And then did a lot of work in Butler again in the stainless later on with the electrical steels that they make there. I did not work that much in the BOF area. I did ladles in the BOF shops, but I did not do BOF or that much BOF or blast furnace work. So as I said, just kind of expands. You walk in, some people move out. I ended up doing some open hearth work where we first made steel, and then they shut them down for steel, and Middletown works as iron pour. So they were making iron in the open hearth. And putting iron in a steel ladle makes you find every hole in the ladle that you can get. So yes, I dealt with a lot of breakouts at that point, more than I ever cared to know. But it wasn't really a breakout. It just kind of came out through the weep holes and things like that. And so, ingot stool work. I mean, all sorts of different things and changes in technology. We went along. Technology on the steelmaking side, technology in refractories. I mean, you had to work through it. You had to, when I started out the electric furnaces for stainless steel making, not just stainless, we're all matte chrome lined. Later on, they went to matte carbon in carbon steel. And for a long time, ARMCO did not go to matte carbon and stainless because the chrome in the stainless would react with the carbon, and we were afraid that we would destroy the brick because of that. So, but at some point we took the plunge, and we all agreed we had to move on and put the matte carbon brick in the electric furnaces. So that's why I say, I mean, it was equipment and refractories. Sometimes one pulls, the other pushes, or the other way around. You have a problem you have to solve, things like that.
So how was the transition from mag chrome to mag carbon?
It was rather smooth, thankfully.
Oh, that's
good. Yes, I mean, except for the shells that suddenly became a lot warmer, which we knew. I mean, because we were using mag carbon in the BOF. And, our group was working on both sides. The lasers, BOF lasers, which everybody works. Those developments were ARMCO research developments. The BOF lasers, all the original patents are ARMCO patents. And I was not directly involved in it, but my group was. So yeah, I went. Many things were developed, many things changed with things. So I was in the beginnings or the baby steps, how we can look at it, of many technologies, because of what I was in research, and because of the fact that at that time we had a big research. We were like most integrated mills at that time. So it was. I did not realize how great a learning experience it was until years later. Because when you're in the middle of it, that's what it is. You don't really think twice about it. Anything different? No, of course not. That's what you expect, because that's what you see around you.
Right. You're so close up that it's hard to take a step back and see the whole view.
Yes.
So what are some of the biggest technical challenges that you faced while you were at ARMCO?
Well, the usual was actually some of it has been slide gates, for example, on it. Live degasser, a lot of things in degassers. Now, the carbon steel people use a degasser maybe half an hour, 20 minutes. When I started out, we had a DH degasser. They're gone. Thank you. I don't miss them. Where the nozzle or snorkel was in the molten steel a minimum of 60 minutes or longer.
60 minutes?
Yes. And so we routinely would melt the can out. So we would lose the bottom section of our degasser and had to change it out. I'm not talking about anything like there is a hole and we, high pressure, so therefore we cut the hole in through the refractories. No, yes, and so that was a huge challenge on how do you keep that snorkel cool enough after it's immersed in steel, 3,000 degrees, whatever, for that length of time. And so yes, it self-destructed many times. That was when I first started out. We also had the RHD acid in Middletown, and we did some changes to those snorkels. There were two of us working on it at that time, and we're able to actually increase the life considerably by some of the design changes we made to it. And but yes, the snorkels were absolutely immense on that. And again, back to Butler, their reheat furnaces run at considerably higher temperatures by design, as I say, from most others, and to the point that we have tap holes in them. We tap slag out of them. So it's, refractories don't like slags that much.
No, not really. Refractory doesn't prefer slag. Yeah.
So yes. So, but you continue, you look at what the technology of refractories has to offer, what you can do, and make incremental changes. Sometimes you can make a quantum step, but usually it's incremental.